Mysteries Revisited, Stanton Friedman's Roswell Witness Letter. The letter had been part of an enormous archive of letters and documents kept by the late UFO researcher. There are few cases in UFO lore as hotly debated as the Roswell UFO crash incident, where supposedly aliens were also collected, an event that has been covered in countless books, documentaries, TV shows, and movies over the last few decades. This took place in July 4th, 1947. Exactly what was found scattered across a ranch approximately 30 miles north of Roswell, New Mexico, in 1947 continues to remain a controversial topic, with some believing that it was a crashed alien spacecraft, some describing to the official weather balloon story, and others again believing that it was some sort of secretive government project that went awry and had to be covered up. A few years ago, a previously unseen letter written by the son of a military witness concerning these events was found among the various documents and files kept by the late UFO researcher Stanton Friedman. The author, who is referred to only as Sean, was thought to have lived in Texas. His father, a military man, had allegedly been taken to the crash site at the time of the incident. Nothing resembles the shape of a conventional airplane or rocket, Sean wrote. There were chunky pieces of relatively intact metal frame and many smaller, thinner pieces of what looked like a fuselage. Everything was made of a strange metal alloy, what he called unobtainium, a very strange, long and light, strong, very light and strong. Some of the pieces could not be bent, while others were extremely flexible. There were also some pieces that appeared to be rusted on the outside or to have been subjected to very high heat, he said. Things got even stranger when his father claimed to have witnessed 3 small humanoids, quote-unquote, that had been packed in ice and loaded onto a plane. 3 small humanoids at the crash. The entities were roughly human-like, but had no ears or teeth. They had large eyes, but no eyelids, and had 6 fingers on each hand. Their skin was similar to that of a shark, he said. They were also ideally suited to sit in the metal reclining seats found in the wreckage. And this is from Bro Bible on Unexplained Mysteries, but there's a link where we can read the whole letter. And said, transcript of the letter can be seen here. Dear Mr. Friedman, January 26, 2010. A friend gave me your address and said that you want to hear from family members of military men who witnessed anything related to flying saucers during their service. I have a first-hand eyewitness account given to me by my father regarding flying saucers and so-called aliens that I think you should hear. I also have relevant documentary evidence left to me by my father that I would like you to examine. In 1973, when I was 7 or 8 years old, I bought a comic book depicting the recent alien abduction of 2 men while they were fishing at night. The abduction story fascinated me. I showed the comic to my father and asked him if he believed it really happened and whether he thought flying saucers were real. To my surprise, my father told me that flying saucers were indeed real because he had seen one up close. I asked him when and where he had seen the saucer, and he told me the following story. My father told me that in the summer of 1947 he was at an airbase in Fort Worth, Texas, for reserve training after temporarily discharged from active duty in the Army Air Corps earlier that year. He said he remembered it well because it happened on the 4th of July holiday weekend. One night he was playing cards when an officer came in and asked for volunteers to make a routine red-eye flight to New Mexico. My father said he jumped at the opportunity, glad to get some flight time. He went as an air crew, not pilot. My father loved to fly more than anything. He said he was especially happy because it was his birthday, July 6th. My father said it did not take him long to figure out something was wrong because everything was tense and hurried, as if it was some sort of an emergency. He said he knew it was no routine flight when 2 MPS, that's military police, boarded his plane with fully loaded Thompson submachine guns. He said they flew together in a C-54 as part of a convoy with a second C-54, a bomber, and 2 fighter escorts. He told me a general was with them aboard the bomber. My father said they were flying hot, armed, that means, and it reminded him of fighter and bomber operations during the war, Second World War, of course. He said everything was definitely out of the ordinary. When he asked what was going on, an MP told him a rocket had crash-landed on U.S. soil. They landed at an airbase in New Mexico and took trucks and jeeps to a remote piece of land. There were MPs already present, and they tried to prevent the air crews from entering the property. My father said when the general told the MPs the airmen were his boys, they were allowed to pass. On the ground, my father said he saw the scattered remains of some sort of crashed aircraft. He said he had seen the remains of crashed fighters and bombers in the Pacific, but this was different from anything he had ever seen before. It didn't look anything like the other crashes. My father said he was the only one present who was familiar with the internals of jet aircraft, since he studied jet propulsion and trained as a mechanic on the Army's first jet fighter, the P-80 Shooting Star. The general knew of my father's familiarity with advanced jet aircraft, and as he asked my father to take a good look at the wreckage and see what he could make of it, my father said the wreckage was unlike anything he had ever seen before. Nothing resembled the shape of a conventional airplane or rocket. There were chunky pieces of relatively inactive material frame and many smaller, thinner pieces of what looked like a fuselage. Everything was made of a strange metal alloy that he called unobtainium, very light and strong. Some of the pieces could not be bent, while others were extremely flexible. There were also some pieces that appeared to be rusted on the outside or to have been subjected to very high heat. There were no discernible welds or rivets anywhere in the wreckage, and my father said it looked as if the entire ship had somehow been cast in one piece. There were no motors or moving parts at all, no propellers, jets, or nozzles. There were no visible cables, switches, gauges, vacuum tubes, or electronics of any kind. There were what looked like long, small lights, solid pieces of plastic of what he called spaghetti, that were not wires or tubes, with no apparent function. There were strange characters on some of the pieces, a type of writing my father had never seen before, although only in the inside of the ship, where there were no marks on the outside. There were also a bunch of loose objects with no apparent purpose. The strangest objects, he said, he found were metal reclining seats the size of a child, with notches for the head, body, arms, and legs, including notches for hands with spaces for 6 fingers. There were no corpses in the rubble. After examining the remains, my father reported to the general, "Kel, it's not one of ours, that's for sure." Asked whether he thought it was a rocket or a jet, he replied, "Neither." The general asked my father if he thought the Russians had done it, and my father replied, "No, unless those inscriptions inside are in Russian." The rumor around the place was that the ship was a crash flying saucer, and everyone present instinctively felt that it was not from Earth. My father said he helped the crew pick up some of the remains until more soldiers and some intelligence officers arrived and told them to leave. He said they returned to the local air base, and then the next day they flew their recovered wreckage back to Fort Worth in 2 C-54s, again with combat escorts, but this time without the general's company. The three small bodies packed in ice were loaded aboard his plane. They told him that they were the crew of the crashed ship. The ice was melting, and according to my father, the bodies were decomposing and smelling bad. He was able to examine the bodies and obviously thought they were not from this planet, and this is what he told me about what he observed. 1, they were humanoid with a head, 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, a mouth, a nose. 2, they had no ears or teeth. 3, they were small and fragile with unusually large heads. 4, they had large eyes but no lids. 5, they had no genitalia. 6, they had 6 fingers on each hand. 7, they had skin that looked like that of a shark. 8, they were the perfect size and shape to fit the formed metal reclining seats he had seen among the wreckage. Upon arrival in Fort Worth, the remains and bodies were immediately loaded onto another transport under heavy surveillance and flown elsewhere. My father said he thought it was all sent to Washington, D.C. Subsequently, a rumor was heard that a fourth body had been recovered separately later and shipped alone with the rest of what was recovered. My father said that he and the rest of the crew were immediately questioned by intelligence agents who ordered them never to talk about what they had seen, forcing them to sign a confidentiality agreement that would be enforced under penalty of treason. My father was a member of the 414 fighter group. He was very well connected with the AAF and the airline industry. His stepfather, Charles Eastman, was an officer in the Kelly APB and helped him get started in the AAF with special privileges. My father's dream was to be a fighter pilot, but still too young, he entered first as a mechanic and crew chief. My father was very intelligent, had mechanical talent, and was very interested in airplanes, especially jets. He was part of the P-80 Shooting Star program, the Army's first operational jet fighter, and trained at the plants where they were designed to and built, where he received low-level security clearances. He received special training in air bases and aircraft manufacturing throughout the country. He was discharged from active duty in early 1947, but continued to train and serve in reserve status until he returned to active duty when the Korean War began. When he was discharged in 1947, he was recommended to continue military training, in which he participated frequently at various air bases and aircraft plants, including plants and bases in Fort Worth. Shortly after leaving active duty, he began formal pilot training and attended the Schreiner Institute in Kerrville, Texas, where many World War II airmen and fighter pilots were trained. My father was very loyal and devoted himself to the Army Air Corps and later the United States Air Force. My father kept an address book with names, addresses, phone numbers of all the airmen he met across the country and abroad, from World War II to Korea. He had regular contact with many of them throughout his life. He regularly attended veterans meetings, VFW, and spent a lot of time in VA hospitals. My father had many well-known engineers in the aeronautic plants, which he trained and maintained his contacts with them. So this is a very long letter. I will leave a link below for you for this. So basically, the son is trying to tell us that the father knew what he was talking about. He was a very credible witness. And the letter is in Infinite Explorers by Anne Shrivastava. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.